everyone, this is the fourth part of this story. If you haven't seen the previous ones, we recommend you watch them first. The officer on duty at the city's military registration and enlistment office looked at my prescription for a long time, as if he had never seen such a document before. Then he returned it to me and directed me to room 16. I knocked on the shabby door and entered the room without waiting for a response. Behind the desk sat a major with a flabby face and a shabby, greasy tunic. "Wait in the corridor," he said without even looking at me. "I don't have much time. I just need to get registered," I replied. I walked over to the table and placed the prescription on the edge. The major looked up at me with his pig-like eyes and suddenly shouted in a high-pitched voice, "What don't you understand? I told you to wait." I threw myself across the table, grabbed him by the lapels of his uniform, lifted him above the table, and calmly said, "You should stand up when you talk to a criminal." The major immediately deflated, sniffed his nose, and covered his eyes as if he expected me to hit him. I gently put his body back in place and pushed the prescription towards him with my index finger. "Colonel Levin, exceptions. Discharge due to a wound? I need to get on your payroll," I added with a firm tone. Yes. Just a minute." The major slowly regained his senses. "Do you have your I-card with you?" I handed him a green card. The major looked at the prescription, then at the photo on the ID card. "Did you say Levin?" he asked apprehensively. "Yes. Colonel Levin. Is there something confusing you?" he asked. "Sit for a minute, I'll be right back." The major jumped up briskly from his chair and rushed out the door. There was a knock at the door and a panting major came in. "Comrade Colonel, the commissary wants to see you. Come on, I'll show you where his office is." We went up to the second floor and ended up in the reception area. When the receptionist saw us, she slowly rose and looked at me with surprise. The major knocked politely and opened the door, letting me in. At the end of the long office sat a gray-haired colonel at a large desk. When I entered, he stood up and came to greet me. "Very glad to see you, Yuri," he said, extending his hand. "Lena, bring us some coffee," he added, then turned to the major. "You are dismissed." The major shuffled his feet, trying to imitate a brave kick of his heels, turned over his left shoulder and disappeared. "Please, have a seat." The colonel nodded towards two armchairs by a massive coffee table covered with a white tablecloth. The secretary came in noiselessly and quickly arranged a plate with sliced sausages on the tablecloth, along with an open can of chicken pate. She also put a small sliced bread on a plate and poured coffee into 2 cups, and sliced loaf of bread. Who placed an open bottle of vodka in a misted bottle and 2 glasses. "Straight literate girl," I remarked to myself. The military commander poured vodka. "Welcome back, Colonel." He raised the glass and we cheered. We drank and had a quick snack. "I'm glad you're here. There was a stir around you, you know. They say you died a hero's death. One guy in particular tried. He even put in a request for you. We sent it too as soon as the funeral letter arrived. His answer was earlier. He said it was true. You're dead. I even went to your wife to offer my condolences. But last week we received an answer to our inquiry that you were alive and not quite well. You've been sent back to civilian life. It's a never-ending cycle. You can explain everything to your wife. If you need to apologize officially, I'll come over." The colonel poured a second drink. I shrugged. "It's okay, don't worry." Everything was already explained to her. The commissar caught something in my voice and looked at me understandingly. Unto to the fallen, the commissar raised his glass. We drank without shouting and sat quietly as we poured a third drink. The colonel got up and went to the table. He came back clutching something in his palm. "Here, I specially sent a man to the capital." He handed me a box. I slowly opened it. A ray of sunlight ran down my hand and reflected on the red enameled order, sunk in the blue velvet. The conversation with the commissar confirmed Vera's words. Dennis wanted to bury me so badly that he even sent a request to my unit. I see, Judge, there are such possibilities. All the more at stake, my own daughter and former mistress. Before we reached home, I visited another godforsaken place and placed an urgent order paying triple the speed charge. There was one question that kept bugging me, and I wanted to resolve it as quickly as possible. I opened the door and the aroma of freshly cooked food reached me. Natasha appeared from the kitchen. "You're just in time. Dinner is already ready." In her eyes shone joy and pride at having cooked food on time, the complete illusion of family. I sighed, undressed, and went to wash my hands. We took a cab to several boutiques. Natasha was terribly shy, but her feminine side won out. I bought her winter boots, a warm jacket, a woolen suit, a down scarf, and even a cocktail dress. I never understood why. I even bought a bathrobe and slippers. That's not counting the special lady items, the purpose of which was a mystery to me. Natasha's cheeks even turned red with excitement. Then there was the beauty parlor, where I almost fell asleep waiting for my lady. To top it all off, we stopped at a restaurant and Natasha showed her new dress to the world. The audience looked at the strange couple with amazement as a unshaven man in camouflage and a young glamorous lady. At first, they didn't even want to let me in, but a good tip melted the icy heart of the maitre d'. I watched my companion out of the corner of my eye. For a bomb, she had 2 good manners. She ate beautifully, using the cutlery expertly. When the lobster was served, she unmistakably chose the right tongs to cut it. Apparently, this woman had lived a very different life in her day. I sat, tasting the tart wine, and imperceptibly surveyed the hall. The hall was gradually filled with people, and the degree of noise increased due to the effects of alcohol. At last, the shaggy-haired musicians played something slow. People woke up and went to the dance floor. "Let me ask you to dance." A floppy man loomed up at our table. Natasha looked at me, and I could read it in her eyes. The girl does not dance. I smiled politely. "No one's asking you, uncle," I replied as the boy reached his hand out to Natasha. "My husband explained everything to you." Natasha didn't even dignify the flunky with a glance. "All right, I'll be back," I said as the unsuccessful view began to drift slowly toward his table. "Can we go?" Natasha looked at me pleadingly. "Husband," she said, emphasizing the word. I looked at my companion in surprise. She was terrified. The prospect of combat contact clearly did not inspire her. I, on the contrary, liked everything, even the threat of a fight. What could be more pleasant than a fight over a woman? Testosterone was bubbling in my body, demanding an outlet. I poured myself a shot glass from a misted decanter that looked like a diver. The vodka wrestled down my esophagus and landed softly in my stomach. Now a salty pickle, I thought to myself, savoring the taste. You can't drink vodka without a horse do you over you with such a piraquipo or a green tomato. And then, after that, something meaty lata layered or cold cuts. I picked up a pickled mushroom with a fork, subtly scanning the room. Some movement at the entrance drew my attention. The maitre d'hotel escorted the new guests to a free niche. Yes, it's a small world, I thought to myself. The first to his table gracefully walked Vera, followed by the haughty look of a mistress of life. Well, I know Vera's current husband, but the young botanist next to my former daughter, I see for the first time. The 4 sat down at the table and began to study the menu. The waiter and the maitre d', who was glowing with joy, were waiting for the order. It was clear that the judge and his companions were known, loved, and appreciated. Suddenly, I caught Vera's gaze on me. She saw me, and there was a range of feelings on her face, from surprise to anger. It was clear that my young companion had caused her to be jealous in the first place. It was even worse to see his ex in the company of a charming, and most importantly, a young companion. Vera tilted her head and said something to Sasha. Pumpkin Kamets. In a moment, both of them were staring at me. I did not know why, but I was in a bad mood. "Shall we go home?" I smiled at Natasha. "Let's get some coffee." It was obvious that she didn't want to leave. I called the waitress. "Bring us some coffee and count us out, please," I said. The musicians played a slow song again. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw out of the table where Vera was resting with the new family. Noticeably swaying, headed a man who was twirling and swiveling. He grinned and came up to Sasha and said something, leaning toward her ear. She answered, and her response clearly did not please the drunken gentleman. He grabbed her arm roughly and pulled her onto the dance floor. The nerd sitting with her started to object, but the gentleman paid no attention to him, continuing to drag Sasha to dance. Dennis, who was sitting across from her, got up from his seat and began to look for the administrator, who, lo and behold, had vanished into thin air. It was clear that the new father himself would not interfere in the brewing conflict. I did not feel comfortable. After all, she had been my daughter for 20 years. I intercepted a pleading look from Vera. "Sit down, I'll be right there," I said. I finished eating pickled mushrooms, wiped my lips with a napkin, and headed to the hotbed of flaring conflicts. Icthyteros, the man, with a donkey-like stubbornness, dragged Sasha to the dance floor. She helplessly looked around at the nerd, lowered her head, and said something nervously on her cell phone to Dennis. Sasha broke free and tried to take a step back. Then the cheeky man grabbed her tighter, forcing her to stop. "Daxames, you can't get away from me. You'll have to dance," he said. He kept her on the dance floor, dragging her back toward him. "Now is the time to interfere, young man." "Shame on you," I said, moving directly at them, on the move correcting my slanted glasses. "But you see, the girl does not want to dance," I said, trying to get closer. "Is it sexually le fait, Alune, please?" I pleaded. "Okay, I'll get you." The young man clearly lacked the words to express his indignation and frighten me at the same time. He let go of Sasha's hand and with his head down, threw himself on me like a bull at a rodeo. Well, that was easy. I took a step to the left while turning my body at the same time. The young man's body rushed past me like a torpedo. At the last moment, he must have realized that he was flying past me, but he could not stop. With a nimble footstep, the hooligan collapsed with all his might, with a characteristic clatter of his head hitting the marble-tiled floor. After a couple of meters of inertia, the man's head struck the Christmas tree, which stood in the middle of the hall, and fell silent. "The flight," said someone from the audience. Sasha looked at me, stunned. I turned to Vera and shrugged, then returned to my table, poured vodka, and drank it in one gulp. "Get out, we need to go," I said to Natasha. She nodded. A waitress came over, and I quickly paid the bill. Natasha and I headed out into the foyer. As I was about to go outside to the cab that was waiting for us, I heard a familiar voice behind me. Vera said, and tears were glistening in her eyes. "Thank you." She wanted to say something else, but I silently walked out the door. My cell phone rang. I read the text message. My order was ready, and I could pick it up at any time. I stared at the yellow envelope of thick paper for a long time, and then carefully cut the edge off. Well, in principle, as I thought, I said to myself. At that moment, the phone vibrated in my pocket. "Vera, something often gets in my way," I said. "Yura, do not hang up. We need to urgently meet. Will you come to our cafe?" I walked over to the table where Vera was sitting, not knowing where to put my hands from the excitement. She looked like a beautiful, sensual woman, which in fact she was. She even stood up when she saw me. "You said you wanted to talk," she said, looking surprised. "What happened?" I looked around for the waitress. Dennis was arrested. I said, "Yura, don't know what to do." Vera was almost crying. "Calm down and tell me more." "At least there's one good news," I thought to myself. "He was detained right in the office." "Not charged yet, but something to do with murder and gold smuggling," Vera said through sobs. "What should I do?" I hesitated before responding. "It's difficult for me to say anything about this. He's your husband and Sasha's father. You ought to visit him in prison." Vera looked at me with horror. I was sitting in front of the woman I once loved like no one else until she broke my heart. "What did he want?" he asked. "I don't have to help you. You made your choice. I knew I was being cruel, but I couldn't deny myself. I would never have left you if it hadn't been for Sasha." Vera looked at me through her tears. I wanted the girl to have a real father. She was silent, realizing what a fool she had been, and I understood her intentions. Well, there you have it. Sasha now has a real father. The only thing left is to wait for him to come out of jail. She looked me in the eye, trying to gauge my mood. She used to be able to do that. "I miss you. I want to have what we had before. I love you. I need you," Vera said pleadingly. "You didn't need me when you were with him? How can you say you love me when you lied to me and made a fool of me? In the last year of our marriage, you were with him too. You slept with him. You loved him." Bear sensed the contempt in my voice. "Your love flared up before my business trip, and then you found out I was dead. You didn't even need documentation of my death. You took your lover at his word." I continued. "You were relieved that everything had resolved itself." She lowered her head in shame and said, "I am so sorry. I don't know what I thought. I guess I wasn't thinking at all." Lifting her head and looking at me with tear-filled eyes, she added, "I'm so sorry. If it hadn't been for Sasha, I never would have left you." I looked silently at the weeping woman. Once her tears would have melted my heart, but now I only felt boiling anger with no compassion. "Yura, let's give it all back. After you came, I couldn't live in peace. I really love you. Personality, anyone else. Please, I made a mistake. Just take me back." Apparently, my silence gave Vera some hope. "You did all this for your daughter. You reunited the family. And the fact that I raised her for 20 years wasn't an obstacle for you. I saw the daughter's attitude toward me. You did a good job of re-educating her. It shook my head and stood up. You brought this on yourself. You'll now take a full spoonful. I spoke calmly, almost impassively. Tonin, as for Sasha, read this? Jules, I put the expanded document in front of Vera. She read the paper and her face seemed to swim. God, it cannot be, she said in shock. It can. Releva, your lover fooled you here too. With his connections, it's easy to do a DNA test. Sasha was my daughter, biologically and in life. Goodbye. Wait, please, can we? She started. We have nothing to wait for, and we can't do anything. It's perfectly clear to me. You've made your choice. We're done. Go back to him. Go back to your husband, I said and headed for the exit of the cafe. Payback to use. It's an action. It was only 3 days of my still not very long life. It was a small episode, full of events. Oh, awaited me ahead. I did not know. Chinally twinny tuition, but time heals wounds. When fate closes a door, it opens another. Fate's Panzer, the main thing is not to lose heart and find it. Till manage to find and open that door. But that's another story. Dear listeners, your support is very important to us. To your ethics. If you like our story, please like, comment, and subscribe. It's very motivating for us. We need your feedback to improve our content.